Hi, my name is Bill Bradley. I'm an extreme endurance athlete and this is my video newsletter. The topic of today's newsletter is the mind is like a muscle. I was born with really average talent. Fact is, I got a couple high school coaches who cut me from their teams who will vouch that I have very average talent. But what I've been able to do is develop my mind. I've been able to be able to push myself through the pain and keep moving forward. So that's how I did it. I mean, that's how what I've worked on for years. Now some of my highlights that include, over the last 8 years, I've completed a triple Ironman. I bike 3,000 miles across America and ran the world's toughest bike race. I did it in 16 days. Now that one hurt. My butt hurt. For a year, I could not sit on a hard seat for a year. I would walk into a restaurant and I'd look around and say, oh, these seats are hard. I go, we can't eat here, we're going someplace else. I've swam 20 miles in the frigid English Channel with no wetsuit and no brakes. I've run 100 miles in Alaska while you pull a 40-pound sled with your survival gear. I became the 23rd person ever to complete a double Badwater with a Mount Whitney summit, running a total of 292 miles with temperatures reaching 135 degrees in Death Valley. I've climbed to 14,000 feet on Mount Denali in Alaska, the world's coldest mountain. So I couldn't walk right. I don't care how good a shape you're in or I'm in or anybody's in. You can't just walk right out your front door and take on these extreme events. Not only do you have to build up your body, but you also have to build up your mind. It's a step-by-step process. So let's kind of take let's take my running events, for instance. So what I did to build up my mind, and like I said, the mind is like a muscle. It literally is. You just like any muscle, you build it up. And you get it stronger and stronger and stronger so that it knows that it can achieve higher and higher goals and longer races or faster and faster times, with more and more, handling more pain. And so what I've done is so I started out, I was, like I said, a half miler and a miler in high school. I mean, I'd have to last on the track for 2 to 5 minutes. And I remember everything in my head was negative. It was like, oh man, this pace is too fast. Oh, this really hurts. I did everything wrong that I know now in high school, mentally, So, but anyway, so then after that, I did kind of the natural progression where I did 5Ks and 10Ks, sort of got out there. And then I was able to, I did my first half marathon, which is a big deal because that's twice as far as a 10K. And then I worked my way up to a marathon. But all those, I kind of was with a group of guys. I was on a triathlon team. I had friends that I trained with for all these events. And so the group thing really, really helps for training and, thinking that, mentally that, if they could do it, I could do it, But then when I went for my first 50 miler, the air gets a little rarer as you start to go for these things. So there's a lot less people going from a marathon to a 50 miler. And that was really hard on me mentally because I remember, like when when I'd finish these marathons, I would be wiped out. I mean, I remember when I got my PR, I was so beat up and so sore that when I went to walk to my car, I could not pick my feet up off the ground. I just shuffle them along the ground. And when I got to a speed bump, I had to go around it. I had to go all the way around it in the parking lot in order to get to my car. So you could think why a 50 miler would be a big mental block for me. In fact, I put it off for years because I was worried I would DNF. And I was worried, like people would put it on the internet and, everybody would know about it. And little did I know that, people really don't care what you do, I mean, there's some people who do, but, most people don't care. They just care about themselves. And so anyway, so I put it off for years doing this 50 miler. And then I finally did it. Like I said, I slowed my pace down. What I found out is if you go 2 minutes a mile slower, you can go twice as far. I can. So I did my marathon. I went 2 minutes a mile slower than my marathon pace. And so when I went past the marathon, I was not shuffling. I was actually still running, and I made 50 miles, and that was a huge deal. But then when I went for my 100 miler, now I'm going to go through the night, which is another huge mental barrier for me. So going through the night is huge because I had never, number one is I hadn't done it. And number two is like 3 to 5 in the morning is like my deep sleep time, and it's really brutal on me. But how I trained my mind was I went out a couple times at like 11 o'clock at night and ran till 7 in the morning. And then I went to work. I wasn't worth a darn, but I was there. Just kidding. But anyway, but I made it, by doing that. Now I had run a 50 miler, and mentally I knew I could run, through my deep sleep time and run, 8 hours in the dark. So I put them together in my mind, and I went out and I was able to make my 100-mile run. From there, I started wondering if I could do extreme temperatures, because I started hearing about, running 100 miles in Alaska. And since I already ran 100, for Alaska, I started training by going, the cold was I would go in this meat locker and I would go on this stationary bike. It goes to like -10, and I would go to this in the stationary bike in the back of this guy's, he had a little small butcher shop and meat locker. And so I'd go back there and I'd be riding my little bike, stationary bike. And then the guy would come back and he'd do like he'd show customers, go, look, there's that crazy guy I was telling you about. He's biking in my meat locker. But that mentally made me tough. At least I knew I could handle 110 degrees. I knew what it felt like. And I was able to go up, and I did, it took me 2 attempts to finish the 100-mile run in Alaska, because the first attempt I got hit with a blizzard and I got hypothermia and I made it like 70-something miles. But even that made me tough. Mentally, I knew what it was like to run 70-something miles. So the next year I was able to do 100. And then I started hearing now about Death Valley, and I'm going like, oh, Death Valley, Badwater, the famous Badwater race. I said, oh man, I'd really love to do that. But man, those were horrible pictures you see on the news or any specials on it. And but anyway, what I did was I found that I worked my mind through my sauna, and I went in my sauna at my club, and I started out with a 5-minute. This is after I got accepted into the race, and I worked my way up from 5 minutes to 10 minutes. And our sauna goes about 180 degrees, and after I get to about 15, 20 minutes, working my way up to that. And then I start, asking people. I say, hey, what's your record? What's your record? So these people are in there, they're kind of meditating, they're oming, and I'm going, what's your record? And so pretty soon I beat everybody's record, and then I remember, so I worked my way up till I was like 41 minutes in the like 180 degrees. And, some in the high 170s, 180 or something. And so then I went, and I remember some kid beat my record, and he goes, hey, Bill, I went 45 minutes. And I was like, dang. And so I went back and I did 53 minutes. 53 minutes and 15 seconds. And trust me, that last 15 seconds was tough because that was when I was going for the door. And I remember I got tunnel vision. I'm going down the hall towards the shower because I think I was ready to black out almost. But you know what? I'm a little extreme and crazy that way, but it worked. I knew what it felt like to be really, really hot, and I had lived, and so I was able to go out and I completed the Badwater. I completed my Badwater. And then I heard about this 200-mile run now. So now I've done this 100. I've done 100 in Alaska, 135 in Death Valley. And I hear about this, this solo, Dean, it's in Dean's books, the Ultra Marathon Man. I remember when I read that book, I said, I really want to do that run someday. And that's before I did any of this stuff. And I said, I want to do that run someday. And so I called the race, the guy up, and I wanted to sign up. And he says, Bill, he said, Dean's the only one who's ever made the 200 miles. He said, 8 other people have tried and they haven't made it. And so I called my dad and I said, Dad, how come Dean's the only guy who's made this race? I go, 8 other people have tried, they haven't made it. I go, what do you think the secret is? He says, Bill, my dad's an ex-Marine. He said, Bill, just don't quit. Just don't quit. And so that's what I did. So I went out there and I ran it. It took me 70-something hours, and I was the second person ever to complete it solo. Like I said, it's normally a 10-person relay, and I was the second one ever to do it solo, behind Dean. And so then I put my sights on, I started hearing about a double Badwater in Death Valley. The people who've done Badwater, they talk about it. And so I put my sights on that, and they have a book on it. It's like a book on the double Badwater, with a Mount Whitney summit. And so I went down, And I tried to get in the race that year because a lot of times you run the race and then you continue up, but I didn't get in the race. And so I had to go out by myself with my team. I didn't have any race energy, anything. And then on top of it, the universe threw out 135 degrees was the temperature the first day. The hottest Badwater ever, the record for it is 135 degrees. It literally felt like putting my head in an oven. It was so hot. And I remember I was thinking like, there's no way I can do 292 miles in this temperature. There's no way. And I thought to myself, I said, stop that thinking. That is not going to work. So you've already done one Badwater. So just try to get out there and just make it 135 miles. You already know what it feels like to go 135 miles. So it's a little hotter, but just make it 135 miles. And so that's what I did. And then I was just going to use my momentum to carry me up all the way to the top of Mount Whitney instead of halfways up. And then I came down, and heck, down is downhill for part of it. You go all the way down Mount Whitney, and you got a little momentum going into the last 100 miles in the desert. So that's what I did, and I became the 23rd person ever to complete a double Badwater, with the Mount Whitney summit, 292 miles, and the temperatures hit a scorching high 135. So anyway, you can accomplish anything. I really believe you can accomplish anything if you use your mind. If you build your mind up and you just step-by-step process and just build it up, and just, like I said, just get out there and take it one step at a time and build up your mind. And then if you're interested in following me, I'm available. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm also, if you're interested in, if you'd like to send me some questions, if you have a question, you can send it to me and I'll answer it. It might give me a couple weeks to get back to you. And then I'm also do motivational speaking, and I'd love to come talk to your group or your company. So you can email me also at epicbillbradley@gmail.com to get information on me talking to your group.